What's going on, everybody?
Hey, Paul. Hey, Chad. Hey, Kara.
Hello.
Welcome to this Lansing Marketing Hackers event. Hope everybody is able to join us. So, how do you guys want to start it?
Well, maybe we can kind of introduce ourselves and how we're associated with Lansing Marketing Hackers. And I don't mind starting. My name's Chad Muntz. I'm with WLNS. And I guess here's our family of TV stations that you may have heard of around the Lansing area. And I'm the digital sales manager. So I'm always looking for new ways to improve on digital marketing and the accuracy and tracking and all that kind of stuff. So we got together a couple of years ago and decided to form this group to see if we can kind of just share ideas and kind of the high tide raises all ships kind of idea. And we've been doing it now for a while. So that's who I am. Julie, maybe you can go next.
Yeah, hey everyone, I'm Julie Holton. I'm the owner and principal strategist of mConnexions Marketing Agency. So good to see you today. Give us a thumbs up so we know that you can hear us. Everything's coming through loud and clear. So our agency, we provide full service marketing. So we do a lot of digital work, but everything you can think of marketing related, we do. We work with Chad and his team at WLNS for a lot of TV promotions. We work with Paul and his team at UnoDeuce. And Paul, I am so excited to hear from you today. We're talking about live streaming, which we're doing right now. It's kind of fun, like we're in this Brady box, Brady Bunch box window. So yeah, thanks everyone for joining. Looks like Stephanie has tuned in. Hey Steph, glad to see you. She's on the team at mConnexions. And so Paul, I'll kick it over to you.
Well, actually, before we start, let's hear from our contributing sponsor or our presenting sponsor, Symposia Labs, and Kara is here to talk a little bit about Symposia and what you guys do.
Yeah, thanks so much, guys, for letting me join you today. My name is Kara Wassink. I work at Symposia Labs. We are a digital marketing agency based in West Michigan, in the Grand Rapids, Holland area. But I'm so excited to be with these guys. We've been talking for probably around a year now, working with them. They're really great people to work with, but we do a lot with social content, paid organic ads. We do, SEO, search engine optimization, a lot of different email marketing, automations. So that's just kind of a lot of what we do. We recently also started doing websites. So we do a lot of different development and creative and all of the underlying assets of that to make it a great, beautiful website to match those analytics and get those sales running. So thanks so much for having me here today, guys. And I'm excited to hear what we have to talk about with live streaming, because that's super important in today's world.
Absolutely. So I guess just a little bit of functionality, a way we're going to do this is like we have the chat function. Go ahead and start the conversation going. We will do a Q&A towards the end, probably about quarter till, and get some questions of what I talked about. And yeah, we'll just start rolling it out there. So I'm just going to start the presentation, and I'll see you guys on the other side. So, getting started with live streaming. First and foremost, I want to just preface it at the top that what I'm going to be talking about is really mostly about the planning process, why you should develop a live stream, how you're going to develop this live stream, and not so much on the technical end, as in equipment or that style, because it's a little bit more subjective when it comes to equipment. There are pros and cons and what you should do and shouldn't do, but I really want to focus on the reasoning behind really developing a live stream and what you should think about doing in those regards. So that's where we're going to really focus our attention on, and just hopefully give you a little bit more ease in developing where you want to go with having live streaming as part of your marketing process, your storytelling process, and so on. So that is exactly where I want to really focus on what this is gonna do. So the first thing we're going to talk about is planning the stream. Pre-production, that's a terminology that I typically use when it comes to live streaming, is the most important part. You really have to understand what you want to do with a live stream. It seems like it's a spontaneous aspect, but there's a lot of minute details that you really have to go through to make sure that this works well, is effective, and things that you're still going to have to really play with, go forward with, and learn from, because the live aspect can be a scary world. And my background, I know I didn't really introduce who I was. I'm the owner and creative video strategist for UnoDeuce Multimedia. We are in our 19th year of business, doing multiple things for small businesses and nonprofit organizations. But prior to owning and developing the business of UnoDeuce Multimedia, I was in broadcast television, doing live programs and live productions such as that. And I still do that for a couple of major events at a couple different times of the year. So a lot of this stuff that I'm talking about has really been something I've honed over the years, and therefore has been really one of those things where I'm able to transfer some of my past into the present. And it's really come full circle, especially during the pandemic. Live streaming has become more of it's been around for a while. It's not a new thing. There's a lot of tools that have been around for years upon years, but during the pandemic, the shift to trying to engage folks with what businesses are doing, or what organizations are doing, and what organizations are needs are really key. So going backwards, sorry, I meant to bring that at the first slide, but say, what do you want it to do, and where is it going to lie? Is this going to be part of your social media strategy? Is it going to be on the social channels? Is it just going to be something that certain select people will see on your website? Is it going to multiple places? Is it going to go to the social? Is it going to the website? That is what you really need to figure out, is where you're going to be placing this story and where you want people to see. And if it's an exclusive thing, because YouTube has certain functionality, such as creating a public stream, an unlisted stream, and a private stream. Now, what do all those mean? Well, for the simple fact is, like, the free stream public is what it is, and the unlisted means that unless you're invited to it, you're not going to find it. Private is simply that. It's a private stream. And then also, Facebook has groups and events and public and business pages. So these are where you really need to think about when it comes to where you want to put this stream out. So that distribution aspect is pretty huge. So, and I've already lost my my keynote. That's awesome. So anyway, I'm going to bring that back up while we talk about the next thing is like, how long will your situation be, and are you going to have it scheduled out? And if you are going to schedule some of these things out, make sure that you're consistent, especially if you're choosing to create a broadcast that's like a podcast or something along those lines. If you're going to have a regular broadcast that's on a weekly, bi-weekly, monthly basis, make sure that you have you're consistent with the scheduling, that people know when it is, and when you're going to do the replay. In other words, when the program is finished and you're going to relaunch it, trimmed it up a little bit, moving forward in that regard, be consistent with that. So, and how are you going, in stepping back, how are you going to be presenting this live stream? What is it going to be? Is it going to be a regular program like a podcast or a video cast, as it could be called? Is it just an interview format? Is it actually on the go format? How long is it going to be? Is this a special event? These are all the things you have to figure out on how it's going to be used, because that also determines the platforms you want to use, who you're going to invite. So knowing who your audience is and where they're going to be and where you want them to be is just really key. So it sounds like, as much as live sounds really spontaneous, there's a lot of these things that you have to think about going forward. So when I talk about the live streaming aspect, and I talked about my background being in live television, hopefully I'll be able to get my, this is one of the parts of being live. Sometimes things work, sometimes they don't. So it's one of those things where you have to roll with it. So you have to look at your live stream, even though it has an interactive function to it, you're treating it like a broadcast, because you're actually displaying it for people at a certain time and place. And not only that, by doing so, you have to have the entertainment aspect of it down. So if you're doing a special event style of live streaming, it's got to flow. It cannot be exactly like a live fundraising event. It's got to have movement. It's got to have transitions. It's got to have all stuff like that. So it's just one of those things where you have to understand. Bringing up this PowerPoint again. So see, there I'm at. There we are. You have to understand that it's one of those aspects where we have to be entertaining with what we're trying to say and what we're trying to do. So yes. So recreating a fundraising event, I mean, you can do that, but at the same time, having that flow and going from spot to spot, it really kind of increases the entertainment aspect to it. And not only that, you can add more elements. And so by doing that, you really have to have a tighter program alongside with what you normally do when we do a run of show for a fundraising event. So just think about that type of thing. One of the aspects that you can also do is try to pre-record it. You can pre-record the entire event, all right? And then launch it and then stream it out. This is good in a couple different ways. You can focus on the development of the story over time. You can develop the entertaining functions of this special event-based live stream, and then you can still stream it when you want it to go out. I'm not talking about scheduling. I'm not talking about scheduling as a post. I'm talking about actually streaming it live, but it's all pre-recorded. So that's something to think about when going forward. That way you don't fall into the stress of things happening live all the time and everybody coming in live and having to worry about several different internet connections and such. So thinking about that type of thing. So because when you do think about going live, that is one of the things that you have to worry about, is the internet connections and the sound, some of the things you don't have control of when it's happening at that point in time. So So thinking about doing a full-blown special event style pre-recorded thing is not a bad option, and there are a lot of different ways to be able to do that. But issues with the pre-recording, it is heavy duty on the front end of the work, and you sometimes have to make sure you work around some of the platform's limitations that you're streaming to and what you're streaming with. When I'm talking about the platforms, I'm talking about like Zoom and Streamyard and such that you're familiar with. So tools that are readily available, but at the same time, and they're very robust, but there's some workarounds that you may need to do. So the biggest thing, this is the first thing, the pre-production phase of building your live stream. So thinking about all of that. The next thing is, I talked about it being live, or even if it's pre-recorded, prepping the people that are a part of your production. That's a lot of P's. That is a lot of P's. So, and I brought up the first thing was the internet speed. This is probably the most crucial. For the simple fact is, you really need to make sure that when you're bringing people into your stream and or even pre-recording it, make sure that they've plugged in their system, their computer. If they can not rely on a Wi-Fi or not rely on a mobile device, it's better if it's a computer and or laptop that is physically plugged into the wall. You get the best service from that. So that is the first thing. The next thing is obviously the audio and video. First of all, a lot of mics externally are best. I use a Blue Yeti. I told you I wasn't going to get into the weeds about technology, but for the most part, if you're going to use a mic, trying something external is good. However, most laptops and computers do have a good microphone. If you're in a quiet room, and making sure that you're in a quiet room, a very quiet, not echoey, not in obviously a situation where there's going to be a lot of noise. Make sure that you're away from pets, that pets don't have an access to your room. We've all seen that happen. In fact, it happened in the middle of one of our live streams with one of a prominent coworker of Chad's who was on our live stream, in which she muted her mic because the dog was barking in the background. And when she went to answer a question, she forgot to unmute her mic. And sometimes it's like, okay. Yeah. So anyway, so therefore making sure that the audio is good. The next thing is obviously how is the picture? And when you're talking to somebody that you want on there, on your stream, you got to check their picture. Make sure that they're not in the window is not behind them, or make sure they put themselves in front of a window. They're not in a darkened room. It's better lit. So because the darker the camera, I mean, the quality just goes down. You can't really see what they're doing. And of course, if a window is behind you, it backlights you. And the computer cameras, which most people are going to be using, actually any camera, it's going to be not very good lighting situation. Next thing to think about when talking to your folks that you want on the live stream, and this is also with yourself, is raise up the laptop, making sure the device placement raises it up a little bit. So it's kind of like you're able to look straight on and right into the computer, and that it's level. You're not looking down. People aren't looking up your nose, or anything like that. So just make sure that the camera is placed, and then look at the camera. Use the camera as your point of reference, like you're talking to somebody. So that is another aspect when you're doing the placement. The next thing is the room ambiance. Like I mentioned before, don't be in a noisy room. The pets and the kids and all this stuff, make sure that you are setting aside a time that's not very distracting, because what's distracting to you is going to be distracting for your audience, and it's not easy to remove that. So also when you pick a room, make sure that it's not so distracting and with the stuff in the background. Make sure that the attention is on you and not what's behind you. And having little things here or there. If you ever watch one of Julie's live streams, she likes to have a nice little bookshelf with a couple of her Emmys sitting out. I don't know if that's like one of those, I got an Emmy, but that's a good example of how to use the room to do that. So yeah. So I mentioned some of the platforms. So picking a good platform. Well, the first thing to think about, and I'm going to be talking about Streamyard and Zoom specifically at this point in time, for the simple fact that my company has used these platforms most because it's really puts people at ease. It's easy to use. Both of them are very easy to use. One of them is obviously synonymous with virtual meetings and such, Zoom. But for the most part, these are the platforms we've chosen to really get started on helping folks do what they need to do. So Streamyard, that's what I'm using at this point in time. This is the platform we're on, that I'm talking about doing this presentation on right now. Streamyard has a lot of really good elements to it, and it's not that expensive. And so I really encourage you to use that if you want to move forward. One of the things that it can do is it can do multiple platforms. It can do, for the highest level of Streamyard, you can do multiple platforms such as Facebook and YouTube. This, like right now, we're streaming live to both Facebook and YouTube. So that's one of the big aspects. Another one is this can be broadcast into 1080, which is a higher version of, which is the highest version of high definition. It is a broadcast only tool. So what that means is, like, you can do social aspects on the within Facebook or YouTube or wherever you're broadcasting it socially. However, the only people that can participate conversational wise are the ones that are on the screen. Like as when you saw at the beginning of the show, as me and Julie and Chad and Kara, we were able to talk with each other, but the rest of the audience is only able to engage through the social chats. Now, and StreamYard only allows up to 10 people at a time on screen. So because it's a broadcast only tool, so you bring in a panel, they talk amongst themselves, and you can communicate with the audience. It integrates with the social aspect very, very well, very well. And so that's why you're able to follow along, all that stuff. But one of the biggest things that StreamYard offers that I found, other than the other aspects that I mentioned, was its record only function. And so you can just record a lot of the stuff that doesn't have to go live. So you can have a nice little tool that you can bring people in, do all this stuff with, and create this video or launch this video later. I use that in my company a lot. I think that functionality is really, really key. And it just allows you to send a private link to someone, and then they can join you. So that is what I like the most about StreamYard. Now, Zoom, on the other hand, is obviously everybody knows about Zoom, but it is obviously great for networking. And one of the biggest aspects that it can do is the breakout room functionality for networking. But a caveat to that is you can't record breakout rooms. That is one of the aspects of Zoom you cannot do. One of the huge things that we've run into helping people produce live streams, with which Zoom is probably the best at, is the ability to have live captioning. Live captioning, which means you can bring in somebody to actually caption your videos on the fly. They have that functionality, in which I have not seen any other platform that we've used do that as well as Zoom. So for those who are heavy duty in the accessibility space, in fact, I think we all should be heavy duty in the accessibility space, but they've actually gone above and beyond what most platforms have done in that, and it's really key. Now you can only stream to one platform at a time when it comes to Zoom. You can either go to Facebook, or you can go to LinkedIn or YouTube, one of those. However, it automatically records, so you can always put it up into a different platform. But the other aspect is there's ways to get Zoom into other technologies that will be able to stream multiple ways. But that is one of the things and one of the big things that for us is that Zoom can do a lot, but one of the things that it does lack is some of the ability to create. I guess that's the best way to put it. The ability to create. There's some creative elements that I can do here in Streamyard that I cannot do in Zoom. And there's some networking functionality that you can do in Zoom that you can't do in Streamyard. So, I mean, there's pros and cons to each. We use both of these tools extensively, and we do the best we can with what they're able to give to do what we're known for. So, well, speaking of platforms, I've got Julie Holton to come up to talk a little bit about one of the platforms that was out there that she used extensively prior to moving on, but I'm going to let her tell that story. So it's kind of like a case study on what to look for when you want to choose a platform, how you deal with some of the limitations of the platforms. And so there you go. So I'm going to bring her on. Hey, Julie.
Hey, Paul. This has been great so far.
Okay, good.
I love that I get to come in with like the what not to do or the what can go wrong. And in fact, at one point, Paul, I jumped up while you were talking. I was on mute, of course, and had to let my dogs out because that reminder, like, oh yeah, so things most definitely can go wrong during live streams. And, so where to start? One quick thing I want to say, you were talking about as you're comparing platforms and figuring out which is the right one for you to use, you mentioned Zoom. Zoom now also allows you to pin someone if you have an ASL interpreter. Mm-hmm. So if you have someone doing sign language that's really important for, especially, for all things, but especially for big conferences. So definitely as you're considering what platform to use, look at those features and what your audience needs. So some cautionary tales. I feel like, where do I begin? Because so many things have gone right for my team and so many things have gone wrong. And, the biggest thing, as we're talking about platforms, we extensively used a platform called BeLive TV. It's it has been for a long time, a very, handy platform for us. I'd used it for probably about 3, almost 4 years exclusively to do all of our live streams. And really it's just, third-party platform that allows us to bring in, whether it's interview style or PowerPoint presentation. We had looked for something that we could do live streaming to Facebook in particular. So BeLive was a great platform. At the start of COVID, we started doing a series that I'm sure most of you by now know about called Expert Connections, where I was interviewing all of these experts in our community about how to help people navigate through the pandemic. And I'm sure, I don't know if we can joke about this yet or not, but remember back when COVID started, 7 months ago or so, it's like, do you guys remember what happened to your internet? Suddenly everyone was working from home. Everyone was on Wi-Fi. We had crazy connectivity issues, and I'm not a techie, so I don't know what was happening, but I just know that it made the video quality really poor, it made the connections really poor, and we were all just muddling our way through it, right? And people were on cell phones, and anyway, so all of that, I'm sure, came together. So initially, early on, we were doing these live interviews, probably about 6 a week. Steph, would you say? I think we had about 6 a week, and we would just suddenly lose the person being interviewed. One of the interviews, I disappeared, and the interview, and that's when we learned that yes, the interview stays live, even if the host gets removed. And so that's really interesting luckily that was Jerry Norris from The Fledge, who just handled it like a pro and kept on going. And so that was a turning point where I learned, okay, so now when I'm telling my people, as Paul had said, you really need to prep your people. So then that became part of my prep work. Like, okay, so if you disappear, here's what to do. If I disappear, here's what to do. If everything disappears, here's what to do. So anyway, okay. So I want to rein this in and give you some takeaways about what to do when things go wrong, because there was one live stream that I did. We had a panel of attorneys from Foster Swift Law Firm, who, by the way, have been incredible throughout this whole pandemic. They have answered every single question we've thrown at them live for our audiences, free of charge, pro bono, just to help the community. So shout out to them. But there was one where we were doing a panel. So I was interviewing 3 different attorneys, and one of them could see us, but he couldn't hear us. And so at the last minute, we kind of finagled, a setup where I had him on speakerphone, but I had the speakerphone muted. So, because we could hear him through the system, but he couldn't hear us. So he needed a way to hear us. And so we made it through. No one knew. Paul and I actually had done an interview at one point. We were doing something for Lansing marketing. No, what we were doing it for Second Brain Collective with Adam Suter of 360 Photo and Design. And, Paul couldn't hear Adam through any of the entire hour-long live stream. He had no idea what Adam was saying. And so I picked up on that pretty quickly and was able to kind of repeat back in summary before asking the next question to Paul. So, when you talk about things going wrong, you just never know. It's like, I worked in TV news for a long time, and we used to always say, it's live TV, anything can happen. It's the same thing when we're live streaming. And so you have to determine in that moment, okay, is this something where you pause and you come back to it? Do you stop the live stream and do you start over? Of course, taking into account that you could lose your audience. Maybe you've got people who've paid for a conference. Maybe stopping and starting isn't an option for you. Maybe you just have to be ready to go with the flow, have those backup plans in place, and know what you're going to do about it. So I want to make sure and give you, before I turn it back over to Paul, some kind of key takeaways for things to consider. A number of you have commented that you are not currently live streaming, but you're looking into it. You're looking at different technology and platforms. I would definitely look at 2 things in particular. One has to be your ease of use. So what if you're controlling the live stream, what do you need it to be able to do for you functionality wise? So for instance, at the very beginning, Paul's PowerPoint went away, and Paul's the one controlling all of the graphics today. He's controlling who's on camera. He's controlling whether the PowerPoint's on the screen or off the screen. He can give me the good old hook if I talk for too long and get rid of me. And so if you're the presenter and you're also controlling everything, you need that to be pretty easy to use. So what does does that look like for you? Or do you need the ability with your platform to hire someone like Paul, to have a pro there so that they can do all of the production for you, and all you have to do is focus on the content and focus on the live stream? So that's one, is what is the ease of use for you and your role in it? The second big one I would say is what is the ease of use for your guest, for the person or people that you're bringing into this. So a couple weeks ago, I had the amazing opportunity to interview Jack Canfield live on Facebook, best-selling New York Times best-selling author of the Chicken Soup for the Soul series. He is a 76-year-old man who has learned how to use Zoom, and I was not about to teach him another platform. So I was not going to use, Streamyard or BeLive or, anything else. He knows how to use Zoom, so we went live with Zoom. So think about the ease of use for your guest and what is their level of technical expertise, and you want to make it as simple as possible for them. So those two things. Real quickly, because someone asked about OBS, and I'm going to let Paul answer more later. But one thing to consider, so OBS is open broadcaster software. So it's an open source cross-platform that allows you to live stream to a bunch of different platforms, right? Like a whole list of platforms all at once. My only caution for you is if you are good at technology, go for it. It's an amazing, platform to be able to use. On the other hand, if you get in there and you can't figure it out, then let it go. Let a third-party system like Zoom or like Streamyard do that heavy lifting for you. I have a client in particular really wanted to be able to go live on Instagram and Facebook at the same time, and I warned her. I didn't think that her skill set would be at a point where she would really have like that ease of use in using OBS. And sure enough, she messed around with it for about a month and then called it quits. And then she was a month behind where she wanted to be as far as doing these live streams, and could have developed a whole different strategy in that that period of time. So just something to consider there is yes, there are a lot of amazing tools out there, and you're going to have to find what fits best for you. Quick note about BeLive: we did end up stopping the use of BeLive a couple months ago. Our team now uses StreamYard as well, just like Paul's team, and the reason being we had just one technical problem too many. Finally got to a point the last time we tried, my guest kept getting kicked out. And there was no warning, and so we ended up having to use Zoom at the last minute in order to go live. And I thought, well, I need a platform that's reliable. I can't be relying on something that I just never know if it's going to work or not. And so now the disclaimer there is, I'm not saying that BeLive is a bad platform. Certainly, it's one to consider. As all of these platforms, as Facebook, as Instagram, as YouTube, as all of these platforms are making changes to their algorithms, the API changes. And so the integration with the third-party systems like StreamYard and Zoom, that has to change as well. And so we have companies like StreamYard that are working to keep up with the changes that Facebook is making, et cetera. And so you really just have to keep that in mind. It's constantly changing, and they're constantly working to stay in communication with each other. So pick a third-party platform that is in good communication, has a good relationship with the social media platforms that you're using. Paul, back to you, my friend. Hopefully I was able to share some helpful information. If you have questions on that, guys, feel free, drop them in the chat box. Paul, you are muted, my friend. So I'm going to send it back over to you as you unmute.
Yes, I am unmuted now. Yes. A couple of things to wrap up this, and then I'll dive into the questions that were out there. And please, if you have more questions, this goes until 1. We'll definitely take as many questions as possible. So yeah, I will. The things I wanted to touch on a little bit, and Julie brought them up, and I thought were really key. But the first thing is, I cannot stress more about doing what we call a tech rehearsal with the folks that are going to be live interviews for you. I cannot stress enough about going through this whole process with them, get them comfortable in logging in, get them comfortable with the system, get them comfortable with the whole process of how this is going to work. They're your guest, and you want to make them comfortable with this whole situation, because now it's more of an interactive virtual thing. So doing that tech rehearsal is absolutely key, and making sure that anybody who is involved, you have to sit down for at least 15 to 20 minutes to make sure that everything looks fine, sounds fine, the connection's fine, and they're ready to go. One of the other aspects is when you are incorporating PowerPoints into your into your live stream, or if you want somebody to share their PowerPoint, sometimes the streams don't work the same way. So if you negate doing any of the animations in a PowerPoint, whether it's animating text on, remember it's animating between the slides, sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes it is sorry, something caught my eye. See, that's all part of the live. So sometimes it doesn't work. It looked great. So thinking about just doing straight PowerPoint slides, slide after slide after slide. That's another aspect. And then to touch on what Julie said about maybe bringing in a professional team to help you manage this broadcast. Doing a live stream and doing a complex live stream is difficult if you are the talent, as well as the producer, as well as the graphics person, as well as all that stuff, as well as even the monitoring the conversation that's happening. So taking one of those things off your plate allows you the freedom to do what you need to do, do what's best for the stream, and allow somebody to help you make sure that that you're conveying the information appropriately, that it's going smoothly, that they're managing the technical aspects while you have to manage the creative aspect or the display of what you're trying to do as a presentation, as a podcast. Because splitting your focus, like I've done here, because I had a PowerPoint that dropped out because for some odd reason my laptop is not, even though it's plugged in, was not communicating well, and dropped out. So I had to manage that instead of somebody doing that. So thinking about working with a producer to help you in those regards is also key. So great information. This is a great way to start and get started and looking at certain platforms. The reason being, oh, yes, Julie, you are muted. Oh, so anyway, so getting started with the streams and understanding what you need and what the different platforms offer. The reason why we went with Streamyard at the very beginning was, at the time, it was one that did multiple platforms. The ease of use and the creativity and the social aspect were key, and it's easy to get people in. So that's why we started with Streamyard, and it has actually increased its productivity nature, and it's added a lot of key features over the past 4 or 5 months that have just been really key to be having successful live streams. And same with Zoom. Zoom, like Julie said, the accessibility functions, I can't say enough about what Zoom offers in that regard. And not only that, but people understand Zoom. And so if you are trying to push a different platform on somebody, you also have to look at, well, this is the platform that they want to use. This is the platform they're comfortable with. And these are the accessibility functions that we have to incorporate into the program. So it's about fitting what you can do creatively into what some of the constraints are for different platforms. And with that, it's the end of my presentation. I'm going to start answering some questions. So let's look at let's let's see, great internet speed to have. Well, that most folks will have really good internet speed, but anything above 9 megs, I know it sounds really low, but will work. Here at my office, it's around, gets up to 50, I believe, but you really have to run an internet speed test, but also, like I said, don't use Wi-Fi. If you can, don't use Wi-Fi, and then you'll be really safe. Although, like I said, sometimes the devices don't act the way you want them to, because, like I said, my PowerPoint dropped. I have that plugged in, and so that's something to think about there.
Paul, we have another question. I'll jump in since I'm on the screen.
Okay.
I can
Sure. Yeah. Here you are.
Questions here. Here I am.
Yes.
Okay. So Skylar wants to know, Paul, would you say that Streamyard and similar programs are easier to use platforms than something like OBS? And I talked about that a little bit, but can you give your take on that?
I would say yes. First and foremost, the answer is yes. Zoom and Streamyard are a little less intensive. OBS is an incredible open source platform that does a lot of really cool stuff. We use OBS and our stuff that we do, especially for the pre-recorded stuff I mentioned earlier, because Streamyard has a limit of when it comes to sharing video within the stream itself. It has a 5-minute limit that you're going to buffer into. If you want to go longer than that, you have to use a different platform. And that's when we bring in something like OBS. But OBS in and of itself can have a bit of a learning curve. I mean, it was a learning curve for me, and I've been doing this for a long time. And so, but yes, but Streamyard, Zoom, BeLive, they are very user-friendly and affordable. I mean, OBS is free. However, what is the drawback to free? Well, you're going to be spending a lot of time trying to figure out some of the functionality for you with OBS.
Right. Yeah, you definitely need to know how to set up all of the code and get things to work together. Skylar says, I use OBS personally on Twitch. I did suggest Webinar Jam at my office, and that's what we use. We like it for the marketing features and registration systems. Skylar, we do the same thing at mConnexions. We use Webinar Jam for the webinars that we have, where we actually want to track registrations and capture email addresses. So I'm glad you brought that up. Really great point. As Paul was talking about, when you're selecting your platform, you also have to think about what's the goal with your audience. Are you just giving this to everyone for free? If so, then stream it live like we're doing right now. But if you're looking just to give it to a specific audience, then something like Webinar Jam or Zoom, where there's that forced registration, is important. Paul, another question here, and I think this ties into what you were just talking about as well. Any advice on interlacing pre-recorded video with live content? And he says, is that something Streamyard helped with, for example?
Well, I mean, when he says interlacing, I believe he means integrating. And Streamyard does do that, but like I mentioned, Streamyard does have a 5-minute limit to showing video. And so, like I mentioned before, when it comes to the pre-recorded end, and if you have to do a pre-recorded full edited half-hour, we use OBS to typically go into Streamyard to do that if we have to do anything that's longer than 5 minutes. So it can be pretty complicated, and we need sometimes 1 to 2 people to help manage that type of broadcast. It all depends on the complexity, but Streamyard can integrate live with pre-recorded, but there's limitations.
Such a good point, Paul, too, because also it probably depends, Skylar, too, on what type of event you're talking about. If this is like a big conference style event, or something where you have a really large attendance and you want that pre-produced, that pre-production factor, that professional feel, then we're probably talking about, something different than, a Q&A like this, or a simple presentation like this that's just open to, we'd be sitting together at MSU Federal Credit Union right now if it wasn't for COVID. So,
right.
Okay, Chad chimed in. Chad, I need to get you back in here. Chad says, it sounds like all of the pre-planning prior to the live stream is super important. That's a big takeaway for me. Chad, absolutely. I'm glad Paul focused on that so much.
I would say that's about pretty close to similar to what they say about film production. 90% of it is in the pre-production phase, which is absolutely true, because you do have to do all the planning of the elements, all the graphical situations, all that stuff has got to be done before you go quote unquote live. And so it's huge, because the broadcast is the time you have it set. So it's either half hour, 45 minutes, 15 minutes, then it's done. So that's a little chunk of time, as opposed to planning the whole process.
Paul, we have time for a couple more questions if anyone in our audience wants to ask anything. You've got Paul's attention. Paul, I have a question.
Yep.
What would you say is one of the biggest mistakes that you see clients making before they hire you? So I know you've worked with a lot of different sizes and types of organizations. I imagine some of them were attempting their live streams prior to hiring you. So what are some of the biggest mistakes that you've seen people make?
I think the biggest mistake, a couple. Number one, not knowing going in how they wanted this to go. I think that's, like I said, are you going to do this? Is this going to be live? Is it going to be a hybrid of live versus pre-recorded? Is it going to be fully pre-recorded? Those questions are new to a lot of organizations. They don't understand because a lot of folks that we've worked with to this point have pulled away from the in-person events and are trying to recreate that in-person event. And so those are some of the things there. And then also not understanding that there's a lot of time that goes into building these, and to allow the time to build it. It's just that that's another one of those things that folks getting started in live streaming now are using it to replace the event that they've been doing the same way for 5-10 years. It's just another one of those, oh, I wish we would have known, or this is something we've got to do. How else do we do it? And so, yeah, it's just one of those things of this is all part of that pre-planning process, but also making sure that if you are going to bring in a third party to help you manage the broadcast, that you give them some time to really give you what they need to make sure that it's an awesome broadcast.
How do you recommend capturing registrations and possibly taking payment if someone's working on a premium stream?
Well, I would say that's a really good question. But I mean, you mentioned a platform right off the bat, Webinar Jam. I mean, that's where, or you can also set up a spot on your website in which it can be completely hidden, except for those who are given access to it, and that way you can track who goes there, and you can put whatever. There's a ton of fundraising software that can integrate with your website and also your live streams. And when you do, because you can also use, like I said, YouTube in a certain, like in the unlisted in the enlisted way to create these live streams that can't be found unless people are invited to them. And so it's a mixture of a lot of different things. Like I said, I don't want to get too into the weeds with but there's so many platforms that can integrate into websites and such like that to help you manage what registrations, help you manage viewership, help you manage donations and fundraising and stuff like that. So I mean, there's a ton out there.
Yeah, so many. I know we mentioned Webinar Jam earlier. GoToWebinars, Zoom is a great way to be able to do that. Paul, I know we also, Facebook is a great way as well. Create a private group. Like you said, have a landing page on your website. In fact, we just built one for this, this project we've been partnering on all through the month with Jack Canfield's team, where we just created a landing page on our website. You sign up, you pay through the landing page, you then get access into the private Facebook group. No one gets in unless they are added in. So you're able to track that everyone's paid and registered. And then we use Streamyard or Zoom for the live streaming function. So there are ways to do it very cost effectively without having to purchase a big webinar platform. Although, of course, if you're doing a lot of webinars, then you may want to consider something like that. Okay, guys, I think that's it for questions.
I do have one more thing before I do want to stress that when it comes to the social platforms to live stream on, and when where you're going to be able to do it, like Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, places like that are no-brainer. Vimeo, but Instagram. Going Instagram live is really difficult. Instagram does not really offer the right API or key to be able to integrate Instagram live or IGTV into the normal ways that I'm talking about for the streaming. And so that's one of those, there's workarounds, but it's very spotty when it comes to Instagram Live and trying to stream to them as one of the multiple platforms that you can. So just so you know, private groups, private Facebook channels, that's another thing to think about. So yeah, and I think that's it. I'll bring, I don't know where Julie went, but here's Chad. Oh, there she is. She's back.
Chad, what'd you think?
A lot of great tips, you guys. I haven't done a lot of, I've done Zoom meetings and Teams meetings and things like that, but actually live streaming like what we're talking about here, really, really outstanding. And I was thinking about for accepting payment, it seems to me that you could use Eventbrite, just like a lot of people do, and then provide that private link to where it's actually going to stream. But really good stuff. Thanks for your great insight on this. I'm glad you guys had the experience to actually lead a really good conversation.
Yes, all this was very helpful, especially hearing all of the prep work. When you actually lay it all out like that, you're right. It's a lot of prep work. It's like you said, what did you say, 90%, 95%? It's mostly prep. And then when you're live, you just need to know what to do when things go wrong and what your backup plan is.
Yeah, and I can't stress enough about really looking at having a partner to help you manage all this, because it's like, it can be overwhelming, and it's a huge thing, and yeah, it's just think about that if you're trying to do something large, something that seems to you, oh well, it's just replacing a fundraising event, but when you get into it, it's like, oh my gosh, I did not realize I'm producing the Oscars. It's like, and that's what it's going to feel like, because there's a lot of legwork and a lot of prep work that has to be done to make it go smooth.
Absolutely. Thanks, Paul. Thanks for all of your insight today. And thank you to those of you who've been watching. If you have any additional questions, feel free to reach out to Paul directly. You can reach him on his website, UnoDeuce.com. You can also reach us here, any of us, and we'll see you in a couple months in December. So we've got, is that right? Yeah, it's October, November, December, oh my gosh, it's like all of a sudden the end of the year is here. So we have a great program coming up in December. We're going to do that program virtual as well. So you can find that same setup today. We'll stream it on YouTube and here on Facebook. And we have Jesse Flores joining us from Super Web Pros, and he's going to be talking all about SEO. But there's kind of a catch on this, you guys. The catch with SEO is that there are major changes coming that go into effect next March of 2021. And so Jesse's going to talk us through what we need to know to get ready as we close out the year here. So that will be coming up in December. So looking forward to that.
Great.
Sounds good. Looking forward to it.
All right. Well, thanks, everyone. We'll see you back here in December.